Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us for our webinar, Azure Site Recovery, Recovery Backup and Business Continuity. A few items for housekeeping. The webinar is being recorded and will be sent out after the event. Our follow-up emails are usually sent about 48 hours post-event, so please be on the lookout for that. Question and answer will take place at the end of the webinar. However, you can feel free to place any of your questions in the chat box at any time, and we will get to them when appropriate. Today's presenter, Michael Trachtenberg. You can take it away, Mike. Thank you.
Hey, good afternoon, and thanks, Lindsay, and good afternoon to everyone. My name is Mike Trachtenberg. I'm a solutions architect with NEWSIGNATURE, and today I'll be walking you through some technologies around Azure Site Recovery, backup, business continuity, and a whole host of features around there. When we start to think about, business continuity or disaster recovery or backup, and you're thinking about those types of terms, something all pops into our mind. And really, it all starts with availability. And that availability is, when we say availability, we're talking about, I need to have access to something. I need to have access to an application. I need to have access to data. I need to have access to historical data, to data that is being retained by my organization, right? And a lot of challenges that people have around that is, they, have complex environments that they have to provide all of that availability for. They need to, in the case of a disaster or in the case of some type of incident, they need to have those things available if they lose access to infrastructure or if they lose data. And obviously, there's a lot of strategies around how organizations have traditionally accommodated those types of situations or circumstances. Obviously with the cloud and having a more dispersed architecture or for your environment, that does become an option. And how can we leverage the cloud, or should we leverage the cloud to even do that? And if we do decide to leverage the cloud, what can we do in those circumstances? So there's lots of challenges. There are, solutions, but it really all boils down to what it is that you're trying to accomplish and how. So. So when we get a little bit deeper into those challenges for disaster recovery, right? What are some of those more specific ones? Well, if we think about, what it is that you're trying to provide availability for, it's a multi-layered heterogeneous environment, right? So you have your, virtual machines, you have physical elements, you have applications, you have data layers, you have all of these layers in your environment that you want to provide, some type of availability of in the course of a disaster. And how do you plan for that? How do you pick apart all of those layers and then apply a business continuity plan across all of those layers. And that is a real challenge and definitely something that a lot of organizations struggle with. You could most certainly have, if we think of a traditional infrastructure sense where we have something like virtual machines that are, being replicated between two sites, right? That's providing some availability, right? The idea is if one site was to go down, your virtual machine would be in the other site, and then you could bring that up, and then you can use that virtual machine in the secondary site. That is a great strategy for protecting the virtual machine layer, right? So, but there's other considerations then. How do we maintain both sites? How do we maintain our connection between those two sites? How do we make sure that we're not losing data, between the replication, right? So there's still other challenges that you have to take into account when you're thinking about, some type of disaster recovery plan that is really in essence to provide some level of business continuity when you're when you're looking at how to operate in the event of some type of disaster. So so why is this important, and why is it maybe important to look at the cloud for this type of circumstances? Well, the first one is, this is your main operating business livelihood is staying up and staying operational. And any amount of time that your business cannot perform its primary function, right? If it's a consulting agency and if you can't, use your data, use your applications to consult, then you can't make money, right? And those things can count to billions of dollars annually from downtime across businesses all across, the US and the rest of the world. These are, just some interesting statistics where you have, an hourly cost of critical application failures, 500,000 to $1 million, right? If you have an organization of 500 people and everyone uses this one application and that one application goes down for 1 hour, you're going to lose millions of dollars per hour. I mean, and this is something that's been well studied, and this is why we want to make sure that we have business continuity and why we have, concrete, solid plans for some type of disaster or incident, right? And why we cannot be so reliant on a single data center model or a single location model or a single place where we have all of our eggs in that one basket. And that's really why we want to spread these things out and build a plan for, what if something happens to that one basket? So just some interesting information there. So, obviously the point of today's conversation is to say, okay, well, what is it that Microsoft's cloud offering? What is Azure capable of in helping to provide added levels of business continuity, and how does it help to solve those types of situations? Well, the first part is the a lot of the infrastructure that people are using, it is Windows based, although there are obviously other operating systems in the mix there, right? So this is one platform from one provider where everything is integrated with one another, right? But also Microsoft understands that they're not the only player in the world, and these solutions can fit into VMware, they can fit into Linux, they can work across physical environments, they can work in other co-locations or co-data centers, and it can even work in AWS, right? So if you wanted to think about, you have a on-premise data center, and you might have some stuff in AWS, you might have some stuff in a co-location. Well, how do we build a business continuity plan against all of that? And Azure can actually help you do that. You can build some type of disaster recovery plan across all of your environment to work within Azure, regardless of where it originated from. And all of these things are built with the hybrid theory in mind, right? So if it's on premises, if it's physical, all of these things can work here as well. All right, so when we talk about protecting all of those areas, we put it down into two areas for the Microsoft technologies that support the two different working areas. Where the first one is the product is Azure Site Recovery, and really what this is a disaster recovery program. It's an extension of your data center. It gives you the ability to have your machines and your applications, and also the virtual machine layer and down to the application layer, to extend into Microsoft Azure Cloud, to be replicated there, and to cut over to that environment in the case of some type of incident. So this gives you business continuity in the case of something happening to a data center, to one of your other cloud providers, to some type of application error, or something gets wrong with one of your virtual hosts or virtual machines, where these items can fail over to a cloud-based version, automatically spun up, and then gives you the ability to work off of that data set. So that's business continuity, but that doesn't provide you with long-term retention, and that's where the Azure backup component comes in. So the backup is your historical type of way of dealing with data retention, holding on to data for long periods of time, be it contractual obligations or just for the need to go back and look at previous iterations of data sets, as well as to do ongoing backups. And the backups, again, could be at the machine level, the virtual machine level, or inside the operating system environment level, or at the application level, to be able to back those things up, retain them at a very, very affordable cost when we're talking about cloud storage, and then being able to pull that data back on demand. So those are the two main areas in which we kind of talk about. So it's these two things together where we have disaster recovery, which is something to fail over and to keep your operations going in the event of some type of incident or disaster, where people can continue to work. And then for you to have that long-term backup for if something gets corrupt, lost, or you need to go back and look at an earlier data set of a particular subset of your data. All right, so this is diving more into the Azure Site Recovery component specifically, right? And how and where this works and what it actually does. the idea behind this is you would have Microsoft's Azure environment that would become another data center in which can tie into your on-premise environments as well as other clouds. And what this will do is it will actually get up and running and hooked into VMware, Hyper-V, physical machines, and an agent could get installed inside of the operating system environments on those machines, and those machines would become replicated up into the Azure environment. And then if one of those machines were to fail, the machine would come up live inside of Azure. And then from there, you can have that business continuity plan where users can continue to work. Now, it's great for the case of some type of disaster, right? Because you can keep working. But also, if you needed to move machines from one site to another site, it can act as a way to just move them as well. So there's multiple use cases for it beyond just providing some level of business continuity through a replication type software. So if we're thinking about, this is kind of just laying it out a little bit more. We have our on-premise, server environment. We have our on-premise data center. We have virtual machines inside of virtual machine host, right? We can have our on-premise environment connected into Azure through some type of VPN connection, or ExpressRoute is just a dedicated connection to Azure. And you can have that connection already established, and that connection is going all the time. Your VMs are then, once you set up this Azure Site Recovery services, they're replicating their data on the block level over to Azure all the time, right? So in the event of a disaster, it can spin up in Azure, and because you have the existing VPN connection, all of the machines or users, all of your on-premise environment can automatically switch over to Azure, and there's re-IPing that can happen and can be automated as well. Obviously some changes in DNS would happen and could happen automatically as well. All of those things can be automated, so it can become an easy transition in the case of some type of disaster. The replicated information is encrypted, so there's no capturing that data and doing anything with it. And that information can move across your VPN or your ExpressRoute, or it can be sent over HTTPS if that's a requirement as well. So you have lots of options of how that data moving over there goes, and your on-premise environment can stay connected to Azure. So in the case of a disaster incident, you have that failover and it takes place. So one of the other really great benefits of this is that, so obviously this is helping to build out, what can happen in the case of a disaster. We have a plan that we're going to fail over to Azure in this capacity. So just having that plan is already a step in the right direction. Some organizations, they don't have a well-defined business continuity or disaster recovery plan, but this helps you to define that plan because you have a service, you have a technology that you're using to manage this, and once it's all in place, you actually have a concrete plan with time to lives also for what would happen in case of an incident. But one of the main advantage of this service also is you can test this plan, you can validate it, you can actually anytime you wish perform a cold failover where you can have the machines spun up to be live inside of a sandboxed Azure environment to test to make sure that your DR scenario is working. It's great to have a business continuity plan and making sure that these things are highly available, but if you don't test that and you don't validate it on an ongoing basis, you cannot ensure that if a disaster does happen, that you're going to actually be ready to continue working. So this gives you the ability to test it in a sandbox environment, and you can validate that it is going to work. But you can do it as a cold test, or you can actually do it as a hot test. You can actually fail over to Azure, have those machines run in Azure for a period of time, right, and then fail back once you're done with your testing and validation. So you can do a very hot, realistic test of your business continuity plan, and you can do it all with all the validation, just as if it was really going to happen, right? So you can test your failover, validate it, and you can fail back as needed. Right. So the failback process, so just as machines are being synchronized over to the Azure environment, once they're running in Azure, it's going to synchronize the changes back to the on-premise environment, and that's how you're going to be able to fail backwards or back to on-prem and to the cloud and vice versa. Right? And again, the matter of the endpoints connecting, well, networking plays a part, but it comes down to changing DNS records, changing IP addresses, and a lot of that stuff can be automated. So what else can this thing do? Beyond just replicating the VMs, there's direct support for things like SQL, where you can have SQL being replicated, where it can tie directly into Hyper-V or the VMware hosts, and it can be aware of the individual guest VMs on those hosts, and you can have a more high-level view of your DR plan and services and the things that are being moved over. This tool can also be used as a migration tool. Right? If you, let's say, for instance, you wanted to get your VMs into Azure or get your VMs into a different data center, well, you can use this tool to move them there. And once you've, theoretically failed over into the other environment, why do you have to fail back? Maybe you don't have to fail back, right? So the idea is you can also use this as a migration tool to get some of these services or your machines into Azure or into another data center. So you can use it for migration, and you can use it for, obviously, its initial intent, which is disaster recovery. So one of the other things, too, is if I can do this, if I can take all my machines and fail them over into a sandbox as a failover test, couldn't I use that for a dev test? Well, yes, you actually can do that. You can take subsets of your organization, or you can take your whole organization, fail it over to a test environment inside of Azure, and then run some type of development upon that, right? Like if you're like, oh, we want to roll out a new version of our XYZ software, but we want to see how it's going to really interact with our environment just as it is in production, but you don't want to do it in production, you could fail over a large portion of your environment over to Azure. You have a nice little sandbox to go ahead and try to do your updates. You can test and validate, and you can do your upgrades to the application, and you know exactly what's going to happen because it is a block for block copy of your environment in Azure in a sandbox. Right? So if you want to do multiple iterations of that, you can. If you wanted to do multiple different sandboxes to test different scenarios out, you can do that as well. So lots of different advantages that come of this, when really the intent again is to build some type of business continuity, but here you're getting all these other intangibles that that you're able to test these items with. So just, lots of different scenarios, lots of things that it's able to assist with that go well beyond its initial intent. But yes, VM replication, doing your time to lives or your business continuity in seconds or minutes as opposed to hours, being able to plan for failover testing, being able to automate that, doing failback, doing these disaster recovery drills without any impact, building a whole dev environment around that, and also actually migrating machines or VMs from one data center or to the cloud. So lots of great strategies and other additional benefits from this type of program. And you can see how this can alleviate a lot of the challenges that we were talking about earlier with regards to business continuity and building an availability plan. All right, so if Azure Site Recovery is the continuity disaster relief type of application, the Azure Backup is the retention part, right? And this is nothing new. It's not nearly as sexy as the ASR is, if I can call it that. But the Azure Backup, it is enterprise grade solution, but there's also other components in there where they can tie into System Center. If you're using System Center now, great. If you're using System Center with Data Protection Manager, you wouldn't understand how that works. Microsoft Azure does have a backup server, which is Microsoft Azure Backup Server, which is basically a light version of Data Protection Manager. And this is a server that sits on-prem and manages backups. And it does operating system environment backups. It does backups of applications such as SQL and SharePoint and things like that. And it pushes those backups to the cloud, right? Then there's also a backup agent that can sit inside the operating system environments on these machines. for the backup agent that sits inside the operating system environment. It gives you file level backup and restore capabilities on demand for anything inside of that operating system environment, right? So if you have a Windows file server, if you have, just a regular endpoint, we've done this with endpoints too, with just, someone's desktop and you have a few critical workers and you want to back up their C drives and their My Documents folder and you want to empower them to do backups and restore themselves, you can install that backup agent on those machines and it can back up, everything, and you can set what that backup schedule is like, back up everything every Tuesday and then at, 3 in the morning, and then keep that backup for 3 years, and then, or, once every other month, keep the backup for 3 years. You can set all of those types of traditional backup policies and retention policies. And you can do it from the enterprise level, which is, System Center. You can do it for, what we consider SMB, but, or maybe a little bit smaller, the Azure Backup Server, and you can do that with virtual machines, operating system environment, application layers such as SQL, SharePoint, or other things like that, Exchange and Active Directory and so on. Or you can do it all the way down to, the individual file level on workstations, endpoints, servers, and so on. On all of these things, it can get backed up to Azure directly, right? So when we hear about people, wanting to do off-site storage, and maybe you're doing tapes, it's like this is off-site storage, right? It's taking, different levels of things inside of your environment, VM level, VM layer, machine layer, operating system environment layer, data layer, all of those things, and backing them into the cloud, which is an off-site repository. Right, so now and then you can build retention upon that, and you can restore from that on demand. Obviously, the best part about this is the cost, right? Storage on-premise is expensive. It's expensive because you're buying for today and for tomorrow and for next year, and you invest in these multi-$100,000 EMC equipment or NetApp and with these multiple nodes and have file replication across multiple data centers. All of that stuff it works well, but it's expensive, and it's not necessarily the way you have to do it anymore, because now you can do a lot of this planning for what your data needs are going to be, but you don't have to pay for it, right? You can back those things up into Azure and only pay for what you're going to use in Azure. So if you're backing up a data set of 100 terabytes, you can have that 100 terabytes upload to Azure, have it deduped and compressed and all of that good stuff, go up into Azure, and you're going to pay pennies, fractions of pennies on the gig, as opposed to buying large expensive equipment to back it up to disk on-prem or back it up to tape and then send those tapes off. It's just that's a very time-consuming, very expensive solution, where this is a much faster solution that is much more cost effective. So. All right, so how does it actually work? Well, there's a few ways. You could have the Azure backup service that's running, and this could, if you have machines in Azure, you can back up those machines. You can also put, and that's going to happen at the fabric layer, right? Think of it as the hypervisor layer, where it's backing up the machines that exist in Azure. You can then also put that agent that we spoke about inside the operating system environment, and that's going to back up the operating system environment on the file level and have those backed up to Azure. And you set, again, the retention time and policies and so on and so forth. Right? If you're doing it the rest of the stuff on-prem, right? If you have all of your on-premise infrastructure, you could back those things up to disk and then have it that backup backed up to Azure, or you can put the agent right onto things and have those backed up to Azure. If you're using System Center Data Protection Manager, you can have that integrate into the hosts and have those backed up to have the VMs and other items backed up to Azure. If you're using just the Microsoft Azure Backup Server, you can back up the individual applications as well, right? So doing SQL level backups to Azure, doing SharePoint backups to Azure, so that you can restore or pull data back from a SharePoint site collection specifically, things of that nature. All right. So that's lots of different deployment methods with those. So those are the two different scenarios. And now I kind of want to branch off a little bit into a little bit just quickly about NewSignature before we get into questions, right? So at NewSignature, we're focused on delivering a great customer experience because even in the last 25 minutes, we talked about a lot of items, and there's a lot of water to navigate there. And what we like to do, and we pride ourselves on, is helping you to understand all of those things, and to do that while delivering a great customer experience. Where we want to help you look at something like a business continuity plan, help you to plan for that, to build it, and help you operate it, putting a strategy around why you're doing it that way, and wrap it all around with learning and adoption for our users as well. So a lot of times with that, we find that and NewSignature, we can do it across the board for any of the various Microsoft workloads are stacked, and we do work across all of the different Microsoft technologies, right? But we find that when we get actually into that operate, once it's an ongoing process, sometimes those things can be offloaded to another organization, or it's just something that some organizations want to have a more set it and forget it type of experience. And that's where with NewSignature, we come in and we have a specific offering to manage people's disaster recovery and business continuity for them. And the reason for that is that we can help set up these technologies, we can monitor them, we can basically manage that whole process for you, and validate that it's working, and perform failover testing and failover validation for you in those sandboxes should you need it. And really, we call this like disaster recovery as a service. And typically, those types of things are expensive, and we try to find a way to help manage those things for you through this Azure Site Recovery process. And the way that we go about doing that is we work with you to create what we call a runbook to figure out exactly how you want your disaster recovery plan to work. We then document that, go through that with you. We have people that are available 24/7 with our 24/7 NOC to monitor that process and to make sure that it's running as you want it to as part of that runbook that we've put together with you. So it's a full managed service around Microsoft's ASR technology. And some of the things that we provide as part of that is definitely like onboarding, managing that whole process, giving you reporting and ongoing assessment of how your DR plan is working, and if we have any testing or validation as part of that as well. So we also offer a whole host of other services, everything from project implementation, application development, and to a whole host of other managed services also. All right, so I know we're coming up just about time, but able to answer a few questions, should we have some. So looking at the chat window here, so the first question, does outbound connectivity cost only calculate when the system is live in Azure and they are connecting costs incur with the replication? Okay, so with that, when the on-premise machines that are replicating to Azure, there is no cost for that. The machines that are in a cold state in Azure, there is no cost for that either. When a machine goes live inside of Azure, then there is compute cost in Azure. There is compute cost at that point. And then when you're ready to fall back, when you're doing the replication back to on-prem, yes, there is a cost for outbound traffic associated with going back to on-prem. If you set this up with an express route connection, so that's a direct connection between your environment and Azure, then there is no cost for outbound traffic. That is included in your purchase of the express route connection. Right. Let's see, next question. Currently VMware environment, if we use Azure DR, our VMs are converted to VM environment. What's the process to bring them back? Okay, so that's a good question with the VMware environment. So they are converted, but they are not they're not converted to like a Hyper-V environment. If you replicate them over to Azure and then they run in Azure and you want to fail back, there's absolutely no problem for them to go back. They're not reconverted. It's actually a different technology that Microsoft purchased. So your VMware machine stays intact. It's brought over to Azure. It has a different hypervisor like virtualization wrapped around it. When it goes back, that's peeled away. It goes back to on-premise as a virtual machine. So really, there's no problem with fail over or fail back for a VMware shop. Cool. All right. If there's any other questions, by all means, feel free to contact New Signature at any time. I know we're just at time here. You can always visit email info@newsignature.com if you have additional questions, or hit up our website. But that's it for the presentation today, and
Great.
yeah, it was great talking to you.
Thank you so much, Michael, and thank you everyone for attending. We really appreciate you being here. Again, the presentation will be emailed out in form of the recording. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us. Thank you so much for your time. Bye.